Okay, good morning everyone.
Good morning.
So today we have here for you the fourth lecture of the series of lectures from Joanna de Angelis. Today, Joanna de Angelis is the spirit mentor of Divaldo Pereira Franco, the medium in Brazil, and she has many books, and it's very interesting because in many of them she will talk about death, immortality, meaning of life, and that's what we have tried to capture in this series of talks. So we are going to open revisiting some fundamental concepts that we have talked about in previous talks. There are, we feel, to be fundamental in the preparation for that phase of our life where we actually enter the active stage of dying. But oops, I'm not sure what I did here, but I will get back to here. Not really. One moment. Let's do that. Let's open the PowerPoint for the web. So while it's, there it is. Good. Okay. Here we go. We'll try again. Don't die on me. Okay. Let's see. Computer is beating me up here. Okay. So we were at the fundamental concepts. Okay. So I just want to, before I dive into this, I want to say that from the 4 lectures, this is, in my feelings, the hardest one to listen and to talk about, because it's about our own dying process. So I felt more difficulty preparing the lecture, so I'm projecting my own difficulties and saying that you may feel that as well. So it's very helpful if you heard the lectures before, because they were built to prepare us to get to those final moments in a better place. So you can find them on YouTube. If you want to find them easily and all together in an organized way, you can go to my own channel, which is Susana Simões 70, and they are in a folder that's called Lectures 2023. You'll find the 3 of them in there. They talk about death initially, then aging and illness, and then detachment and loss, and brings us to this last one here today. And while I was getting ready to come to the center this morning, it came to me, which was not in my mind, that part of the difficulty in thinking and talking about the actual dying process is the fact that when we come into our physical bodies, it's as if God anchors us in the physicality of this realm by giving us the instinct of preservation and a few other anchors that are divine, such as the forgetfulness of the past, such as the action of the body in really limiting the spirit's perceptions. So all those factors, they help us to anchor in this physical world that is a difficult one to to travel through, but because we are so well anchored, when it comes the time to leave, it's also challenging. And I want to recognize the difficulty of the process, and even the spirituous information and everything that we have does not take away the challenges for us in our level of evolution and in our physicality to let go. So I want to acknowledge that it's not meant, it will not do the work, the miraculous work of making this a, you know, simple experience, because it's not, and it will not be. But hopefully the faith, the understanding, most importantly the certainty of our immortality will help us to unload the anchors and allow a easier process, an easier transition for all of us. I was getting ready, and this whole idea came into my mind in the form of images and feelings. So I thought I would start with this statement about the anchor. So, following the same pattern of our previous talks, I have a lot of slides because I do want to bring the words of Joanna de Angelis, and we'll go through them and we'll think about them. These are some fundamental concepts, and we did talk about this idea that we at times would like to remain immortal in the physical body. And it's really interesting because she brings this passage about Gulliver Wander's travels. In his travels, he visits a country. Every 100 years, a generation of physical immortals is born. As was natural, Gulliver wanted to meet some of those who had overcome biological fatality, being taken to an infirmary where multicellular microbes were in deplorable state of organic degeneration, with the form limbs decomposing life due to putrescible matter. I'm not even sure if that's how you pronounce the word. The idea here is a strong image, if you can go there, to imagine people who never die physically. And he goes to this place and he sees all these bodies in decomposition in life, because matter is changing. No matter what, we are getting older. And so imagine a non-cessation of this process. And that's what she brings to us, this idea. So when we think about immortality, we wanted to think about immortality beyond the physical body. Okay, so when we talk about another concept that is important is the concept of impermanence. We did talk about it. So everything in the physical world is impermanent, and this impermanence can be seen in two forms: the outer gross, the inner subtle. Nothing is ever the same, although the appearance it preserves in different time periods. So things might look the same, but they are not the same. And everything is always changing. And I did talk about that before when I brought the idea that it is precisely movement that keeps the universe balanced. So movement is life, movement is balance, and everything is changing. We are changing, whether we realize that or not, both internally and externally. And the other fundamental concept is the concept of detachment. To reserve mental space for detachment from things, people, and positions, analyzing the inevitability of death, which forces the individual to leave everything, is a healthy and necessary therapy for a happy transit through the objective world. So, exercise detachment in your minds. And again, that can have many different forms. Look at your family, love your family, love your loved ones, but understand that, let's take your children or your grandchildren. They are we all are adoptive parents, because no spirit belongs to us, right? So our children are not our children. Our children are spirits who momentarily God lends to us so that we can make a contribution for the evolution of that spirit, and at some point we will give those spirits back to where they truly belong, life. So these are concepts that we need to play, to exercise in our cognition until we get to our guts and our hearts. Okay, so those were concepts that we worked more in depth in our previous presentation. So today we're going to talk about that moment where you get the final diagnosis. Okay, mostly we're going to be thinking about when life has taken its course, we are at the older ages, and we get that diagnosis for which there is no cure. But we can also think about it when that happens early on in life. But early on in life, sometimes the body amazingly will have resources to recover, and a lot of times things are reversed. But there is a point in life where we know for sure that cannot be reversed. So get the final diagnosis. So Joanna will say that diseases, when installed, present themselves as a vehicle of future cellular disjunction, always producing disquieting states, especially in those who consider the carnal journey as the only one. You may have noticed that I have no references, and the reason why is, unfortunately, these lectures come from 4 or 5 books for which we don't have translation yet. The main one being Existential Conflicts, which is a truly amazing book, and I would say probably 70% of the content comes from this book. So I think there is really no preparation for hearing a final diagnosis. It's a tough experience to have, but certainly will be tougher if you don't have any expectation or any faith or any understanding of, that we are not this physical body. When faced with unexpected events, such unannounced illnesses, it is essential to keep thinking about the brevity of the body and the perpetuity of the spirit, preparing for the interruption of the vital flow at any moment. So this is what we're going to focus today, is like, okay, so you have had the diagnosis, and what comes next? Spiritually, emotionally, what that time means or can mean to any one of us, because it will come a moment that the vital flow will be interrupted and the body will die. So a lot of people is very scared of these moments. Actually, some people will say, I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of the dying process. And because it can be, well, it's unknown, and everything that's unknown brings a little bit of anxiety, but it's also, we have ideas of, like, it can be painful, it can be very devastating. We have all probably witnessed someone undergoing cancer, which can be a very trialing disease to undergo. So there's a lot of fear, and also fear with death itself. So Joanna brings in many of her books many different reasons why we fear death so much. And one of them is these archaic atavisms, fears of the unknown forces of nature, when primitive men suffered a terrible gauntlet, fears of eternal punishments without mercy or compassion, perverse fantasies that have been inculcated through the millennia in the human mind. So remember, we have had many lives, and maybe during many of these lifetimes, we have been instilled with the fear of death, of punishment, of hell, And when you hear something for so long, that can get into your psychology and it stays with you. So it comes all the way back from where we were in the caves and our relationships with death. I mean, people would die and we had no idea of what had happened, right? So there was a lot of unknowns at the time, and that remains in our psychology. Another factor is fear facing our unconscious. When spiritual rebirth beyond the ashes and organic dust takes place, burying the being. So if you have guilt, things that take our sleep away, turmoils, the idea of the, going to trial after you die and facing your unconscious. Here, when we're in the physical body, we can more easily get distracted from those thoughts and feelings. We can bury them. The physical body helps us, but what's going to be when I die? And we know in spiritism that actually being outside of the physical body makes things a little bit more, what would be the word, concrete and evident. We cannot hide from ourselves. So that is the importance of really making peace with the present moment, with people, and just developing that state of peace within now, because that if you are in that place now, you will be that place later on. But that is a source of fear, as well as the materialistic culture that believes that when you die, everything is gone, right? So your memory, your intelligence, reason, and they return to nothingness. So some people fear that. And impregnating itself with organic matter, the spirit falls relatively asleep, forgetting the great home from which it comes, and somehow intoxicating itself in the fluids that sustain the physiological clothing. So naturally, like I said, because we are anchored in this physical body, we are fighting against the instinct of preservation. We want to stay. It's here to, we often hear that if it wasn't for this instinct, we would take our lives with much more ease. But the instinct makes us stay. And not only we are immersed in these fluids of matter, but a lot of times we also create extra anchors. So there are the divine anchors, and there are the anchors that we create with our thinking, with our illusions, that ground us even deeper to this material reality. So she says, when facing the concept of survival with balance, death disappears, and the fear it may inspire is transformed into emulation to face it with a healthy psychological attitude and motivation. Deep-rooted mental addiction, fear of the end, becomes hope of a new beginning. So this is about faith. It's about rational faith. So this is one thing that can help us to conquer the fear of death. When we have lived a life that has been deeply spiritual, right? So that is what what we have to offer here as a center, as a community, is come, be with us. It's very difficult to be, not impossible certainly, but given where we are in our humanity and trajectory, it's very difficult to remain so spiritual when we are not supported by a community. So being here, being part of the community, getting involved in works, in study, in the life of the center helps us to remain that connection with the spirituality that little by little turns all these cognitive theories into a way of living. in such a way that hopefully by the end, when we get to that point of frailty and certainty that the time is coming, we can find ourselves in a profound state of peace. Peace with the journey. Peace with what is to come. Peace with, because we are filled with hope. It's possible. It seems so weird for so many people, but it is possible. When we see a lot of people who come to the end of life and they are immersed in peace and gratitude and just connected to the present moment with no fear. So, okay, so when we hear about the diagnosis, she talks about several phases that are many people, especially if they don't have this background that we are trying to develop here, they might experience. So it doesn't mean that you will experience, hopefully not, but we will see many people experiencing. One of them, the first phase is anger. So we should say, upon becoming aware of the distressing diagnosis of treatments unable to solve the problem, it is normal for the unprepared individual to experience feelings of anger, revolt against the world, other people, or himself, in a tormenting mechanism of transferring blame and responsibilities, as if the same drama would not occur beyond its borders. At this stage, the questions are unjustified. Why me? With so many people in the world than me who was affected by this perverse disease. So I'm sure you have maybe seen someone or heard someone who in that first moment when receives the diagnosis is like really, really angry. Sometimes people who have been very faithful, they at that moment they start to question God. Because if I have, and this is it's kind of funny in a tragic way, it's like as if you have been faithful and if you have been dutiful or spiritual or charitable or whatever, you know, that prevents you from getting sick or, God forbid, dying, right? So it shows the vulnerability and the frailty of our faith and the frailty of our understanding of God and life. So, but we do see that, and people get really angry and they divorce God sometimes, right? They break up with God as if that is possible. Once they are over the anger phase, a lot of times they go into denial. So it's common during this period to experience a feeling of denial of the disease as a reaction to what is considered an injustice of life or divinity when the patient has religious ties. Okay, so you went from anger to like, just, it can't be happening, it's not happening, and you just try to forget and go on with your life. You denying your condition. So a lot of people go through this phase of denial and again putting in question the justice of God. So if I'm good, I shouldn't be punished. And a lot of times the diseases or the death process will be experienced as a punishment, as if we did not know from the moment that we were born that one day we would physically die, and that being a physical body, we are all prone to physical illness. Then we can go into that phase of false hope. So she would say, okay, so you are angry, you deny your condition, but you know what? The problem remains there. You can't escape it. So even without overcoming this phase, the patient enters another behavior, which is false hope around some solution, in vain expectation of a miracle or therapy not yet tried which will lead to the experience of health which has not always received adequate care in previous years. So, two things about this slide, right? We see a lot of that. I mean, this sense of false hope, a lot of times what is underneath is despair. Is like, okay, I gotta try anything and everything, no matter what. Sometimes it's the patient himself or herself, sometimes the family members who have gone also through anger, through denial, and now it's like, we'll do everything. I have a patient right now that has a diagnosis of progressive supranuclear palsy, which is kind of a cousin of Parkinson's disease, but that progresses in a much faster way. And we are treating her in therapy, and she's been with us for a year and a half, and I mean, in a good way, we have been able to maintain her level of function and mobility. She comes to therapy 3-4 times a week, and we have made many adaptations to her house, but the sister is like, but I found this treatment in Tampa, I found this specialist in University of Miami, I found this, and because we're an insurance company, we have to approve or deny all these requests. Now mind you, this is a terminal illness for which has no cure. So she is receiving adequate treatment, but it's like, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't look for what else, but again, this is an elderly individual with a very terminal condition. So things that we need to weigh and see where is all those things coming from. And I'm going to go back here just to highlight one more thing. And a lot of times we get to this phase after we have not given the physical body the adequate care, right? So we have led lives where we have been sometimes neglectful to our bodies, but now we want to find at any cost something that can reverse a condition that unfortunately for our humanity, where we are, a lot of times we have been responsible to some extent to the presentation of that condition. So people with problems caused by drug addiction, alcoholism, smoking, always when under the severe scourge of degenerative processes, a consequence of the unfortunate addiction, usually justify themselves that they have already abandoned it and do not understand how they find themselves in such a deplorable situation. We see that. Oh, I stopped smoking. Why am I still like, with this cancer, for example? And people get really angry, and people get really like, it's like, I've done my part. Why can't I live? And they will find themselves in this struggle and angry many times. So she'll continue to say that the destruction mechanism has already done its job. Detaching oneself from the addiction does not allow the recovery of worn out tissues, those irreversibly destroyed. It only provides some survival, often marked by suffering and by the bitterness that comes from late repentance. So this is not easy for us to hear. We all to some extent sometimes don't do the things that we know that we need to do, especially with the abundance of medical information that we have today in showing us what is the healthy ways. We don't do it because of many different reasons, but at the core of the reasons is human frailty always. Is our difficulties, our incredible difficulty in managing emotions, feelings in a healthy way. And so we are always escaping, we are always compensating, and in ways that become destructive to ourselves. But the point of this slide is that, let's say someone who is with a cancer from smoking, unfortunately, and very unfortunately, once you have emphysema, for example, that means the alveoli is already destroyed. It cannot be recomposed. So that destruction, you're going to have to live with that. There is nothing that can be done. Yes, you might be able to live a little longer, but that process can no longer be reversed. Then we enter a phase that we bargain with God. Now, let's make an agreement here. Let's try to, if I do this, if I give you this, you give me that, right? Let's kind of work here some type of agreement. So people come up with our lives. They will bring some proposals, some ideas on how we can do things. And one of them is bargaining with the Creator, as if the moral transformation of the individual was not an edifying process for him. So all that process that we are undergoing is beneficial to us. As painful as it might be, is beneficial, and if we are open to it, will promote spiritual growth. The individual then has a false idea that if there is change in his moral and mental behavior, through promises that most likely will not be fulfilled, because we're easy to promise, but not so good at fulfilling our promises, manumission will be granted, and that will not have its natural course. So basically, God will relieve us and grant us I'll be good. Oh, you know what? I'm going to start every Sunday going to conscious living from now on, right? Or I'll be going to give soup to the poor on a weekly basis, daily basis, and please keep me here, right? That kind of bargaining. So, and we think that God will then release us and give us our freedom so that we can remain here. So that's, I'm saying in a playful way, but it does happen. People do believe it, and they will try to bargain with the Creator. Some people never pray in their lifetime, and that's the moment that they will. But instead of praying for, expand my faith, my vision, my understanding, they're going to start negotiating. Then, you try everything, now you're discouraged, right? You have bargain, you have being anger, you have curse, you have divorced God, you have denied and negotiated, now you are discouraged. So consequently, because no transformation occurs as expected, discouragement takes hold of the patient, who goes into depression and grief, silencing himself in anguish, as if this attitude could bring him comfort and consolation. So we'll find a lot of people very depressed, very they go inwards, they sometimes close themselves into silence, they withdraw from life. And then we get to the phase 6 that may or may not happen. But if it happens, this is where incredible opportunities arise, which is when you come to a place of acceptance and active surrender to the process, and you open yourself to what it is. So she says, finally the patient awakens to the reality of what happens to him and allows himself to be guided by the natural processes of the organism, sometimes acquiring strength and resignation, also resulting from the help given to him by the guiding spirits that prepare him for liberation that won't be long. So this is an important point here, because the same way we are assisted to be born by our spiritual benefactors, we'll always be assisted to go back home. And if we are in that mental and emotional state where we understand, like I said, that you achieve that place of peace, you can actually become an active participant on the process not by accelerating the process, but just by being open, you allow for your benefactors to assist you. You'll be more in better conditions to receive the spiritual assistance. It's very common for people who are at the very frail stages or last stages, what they start doing, they start seeing the dead, right? Because they are already, the spirit is not as confined to the physical body anymore. The ties that attach the spirit to the physical body starts to loosen up. So the person starts to live in more the spiritual life than the physical life. And again, if that person is in peace, he or she is going to start to actively see the dead and the preparation and partake in the entire process. When organic disturbances that foreshadow death occur, they are not accompanied by too much discomfort or suffering. They transform the dying process into a wonderful gift of waiting, enjoying the concessions of life, which goes on and can be experienced in another way than the usual one. So when I read this, I thought, this is for people who are doing PhD in spirituality. To think that the dying process is a gift of waiting, right? It's a challenging concept for us. Enjoying the concessions of life, but you know, each moment, and we did talk about this before, each moment has its gifts. And a lot of times, if you have had a loved one who died and you were able to be close to that person during those last hours or last days, and the person was granted the merit to be alert and to be conscious, so much happens on those moments. And that's where the whole role of hospice care comes in, which eventually I want to get to it, but in allowing people to die with quality. In other words, not profoundly sedated, not intubated, not in a cold room of ICU, but naturally and surrounded by love, and sedated enough just to not have the pain, but to have awareness and to be able to be with the people that means the most for them. And then again, so much healing, so much resolution can be achieved on those moments. So the concessions of life, being present, being alive in whatever stage of life we are in. Then she goes on to talk about this edifying behavior. A serious illness, a paralysis, an amputation, or any other death-pronouncing occurrence should not destroy or disturb the days available, it being feasible for the patient to adopt an edifying behavior, propitiating well-being for himself and of satisfaction for those with whom one lives. So basically what she's talking about is once you come to acceptance, so you can also from that moment on change your entire behavior and say, okay, you know, each day, and we should live this way. If today was the last day of my life, right, how would I live it? How would you live it, the last day of your life? The best answer is doing whatever you need to do every day, right? Attending to your duties, doing the things that are valuable to you, they're important to you. Being with the people that matter to you. And so once you get to that place of consciousness and peace and acceptance and surrender and even hope, why not? Then you can take advantage of every single minute with some edifying behavior, which might be a conversation, which might be a visit, which might be doing something, if you still have strength, that is meaningful to you, looking out of the window, reflecting. The only logical attitude in the face of death is the fixation on life and its concessions, experiencing each moment adequately, even when everything apparently conspires against this attitude. And she says, there is a lot of beauty in our expressions of life, particularly in the terminal stage of existence, if you acquire your own perspective and adapt your feelings to the situation which you are undergoing. But again, to get to the end and to be able to do this, you have to be on the journey. It's very difficult, not impossible, but much more difficult if you spend an entire life distracted from the fact that you will die, and then when that final diagnosis hits you, you feel like you have been struck by a lightning and you are now destroyed. It's hard to come back from that. But if you have been prepared, if that paradigm is part of who you are and you have become, then yes, you'll be able to adapt your feelings to the situation and you will be able to navigate that, making the most out of that moment. Considering immortality as the great definitive goal, every moment of the bodily journey represents a valuable opportunity for growth and precious psychological investment for the achievement of integral health, the one that proceeds from the inside to the outside. The physical body might be dying, but the essential being, the spirit, like I mentioned before, is being strengthened. These are proportionally inverse processes. As the body becomes more frail and unable, the spirit becomes more able and stronger. So that's the shift on the scale. And the frailty of the physical body provides the spirit an incredible opportunity for psychological investment. It's the time where we start looking back. My father-in-law, who moved with us, he's going to be 90 in 6 months. He moved with us 2 years ago. Every time he talks to his daughter, he goes back to the past. He goes back to relationships. He talks about the relationships. He reflects on the things that he didn't do. He reflects on how he sees things differently at this moment. Very powerful. And when I look at that, I see God is giving him these years, which might be very difficult for us to witness the physical decline, but if you have eyes to see, you will see that it is precisely those years that are going to hopefully grant him a better entrance in a more psychologically minded and prepared way into the real life. We're looking for quality of life to the very end. A happy existence is not necessarily one that is short or long, but one that becomes a message of joy and well-being for the person himself as well as for all those around him. Death is not a failure of life, but an admirable experience. So that is a shift, a completely shift. I think even talking here today, as I went through the slides, I'm like, man, it would be good if I do this lecture maybe 25 times. So to see if every time I say it, it feels easier within me. So it's not easy, but I think this last sentence is very powerful. That is not a failure of life, but an admirable experience. The important thing, she goes back, is not the duration of the body, but the way life is lived. Often people ask me, how do I prepare to die? Preparation for dying is how you're living every single moment of your life. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go back to a very important concept that Joanna brought to us on the very first lecture. It is the presence of death. It is the finitude of the physical body that fills our life with life. The more awareness we have that the physical body will come to an end, the better chances we are to be fully present and fully alive in each day of our lives, understanding the gift that it is to be here each day. What is important, therefore, during physical existence is not the durability in which life is structured, but the way and depth in which it is lived, to the awareness of each moment, overflowing it with beauty and joy. And here comes the final stage, the alchemy of the soul. The alchemist's dream was the transmutation of base metals into high-value gold, which was not achieved. However, psychologically, this alchemy in the human soul is possible by transforming shadow into light and conflict into the gold of harmony. So think about it. What I'm doing here is inviting you to the journey of being the alchemist of your own soul, of your own process, of your own life. And to take everything, every single struggle, every single difficulty, even death, and transform into the gold of harmony, into the gold of peace. Peace that only a strong faith can grant us. And this is what Spiritism has to offer us. This solid foundation that when we leave here, we don't say, I believe in immortality. We start saying, I know I am immortal. And that changes everything, whether you were being invited to witness and honor someone's life at the end, or if you're dealing with your own journey. With this attitude, you will face the inevitable death with full awareness of survival and full joy for having prepared yourself for the great journey homeward. And here we leave you with this image of the one who came to tell us, to give us, without a doubt, the example of our immortality, our love Master Jesus. May He bless us all today and always. Thank you.